Bitcoin is about protecting job participation in the future. It's fixing this problem of broken money, allowing us to have sound money, property rights. And for the individual, allowing them, especially young people, to show up in the world, show up in the future as their full personhood. And you don't get that in crypto or blockchain.
This week, we are talking about the adoption of Bitcoin among Gen Z and the future generation of Bitcoiners with the founder of the Bitcoin Students Network, Hough. Bitcoin Students Network is an organization which helps university students around the world found Bitcoin clubs at their local institutions. I'm Scott Dietels. I'm the CEO and founder of Block Rewards, and part of our mission in bringing Bitcoin to the workplace is helping people understand how it will help them. Today's episode is a dive into what young people are thinking about when it comes to Bitcoin, planning for the future of money, and how the dissemination of those ideas is working at the university level. Stick around. All right, welcome to another episode of the Block Reward podcast. This week we're joined by our special guest, Hough, founder of the Bitcoin Students Network. Ella, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. Really glad to be here.
Lots of interesting, I think, places we could take this conversation. You're like a younger person in the Bitcoin space doing a lot of very cool things. Maybe just for the benefit of our listeners, maybe we could start with how you got started with Bitcoin and how long you've been in the space.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that. And, just before I kind of dive in, I think something that's very unique about our space and our community is that people really want to see you win and succeed. And so I owe so much to what I've been able to do, or if, anything meaningful so far because of the support of others. So very grateful for that. But this is kind of year 4 in Bitcoin technically. I first really ever started learning about Bitcoin the year of my senior year of high school in the spring. So that was now 4 years ago. I'm in my senior year of college. And it was really only ever presented to me in terms of distributed ledger technology. At the time, I was also really interested in AI ethics. That was more of my focus. And so I thought, okay, this sounds kind of cool, but I'm not seeing the personal connection. I'm not really connecting all of the dots yet. And I learned it in a class that my high school had called blockchain technologies. But then fast forward about a year later, my mom and I attended the Human Rights Foundation's Oslo Freedom Forum. And that plane ride home is when I say I truly kind of discovered Bitcoin. And that's what sent me down the rabbit hole. And now you mentioned the Bitcoin Students Network. I co-founded that with Arsh Malu, who works at the Human Rights Foundation. So it's a very full circle in a way, you'd say.
Yeah, it's very cool. And maybe for the benefit of our listeners who didn't put that together, your mom is Lisa Hough, who was a guest on our show about a year ago, and is also herself very, very active and influential in Bitcoin. And so, so that's very cool. So you're taking courses about blockchain in high school, which I think is interesting on its own. There is sort of this like challenge today in people who are trying to understand Bitcoin and the broader space around it, around the difference between blockchain and crypto and Bitcoin. I'm sure this is something that comes up a lot for you, but how do you discuss the difference or the Bitcoin's place in technology, like for people, your age who are interested in asking you, like, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, it goes it can go a variety of different directions depending on what experiences that person might be coming in with, what information they've learned, how they might have learned it. But at the root of it, really, Bitcoin is about protecting job participation in the future. It's fixing this problem of broken money, allowing us to have sound money, property rights. And for the individual, allowing them, especially young people, to show up in the world, show up in the future as their full personhood. And you don't get that in crypto or blockchain. And we can go into that. But I think starting from the definitions and really also trying to big picture, what are we working towards? What are we trying to fix? And it's easy to kind of filter it out through that.
I think about, it's such an interesting thing especially for somebody who's sort of exactly your age. Bitcoin was just starting its last run up while you were in high school. And now during the course of your university career, you have sort of been around for the FTX crash and the drop from 69,000 to 16. And now seeing it past 100,000, it's quite a time to be alive. But certainly for people, I think, who are just finishing up their undergraduate studies and getting ready to potentially enter the workforce. I'm dating myself a little bit here. Many moons ago, when I was in university, is like the average university student, I don't think had a general concern about their ability to go out into the world and own a home or, start a family. And like the just financial landscape of how young people would have thought about the future was vastly different when money worked a lot differently. And you mentioned about, Bitcoin sort of being this tool to save for the future. And now you're doing this work with helping students understand Bitcoin. To come back to the Bitcoin Students Network and the Cornell Bitcoin Club, maybe what happens in university Bitcoin clubs, and what is the conversation like there?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll just go a little bit back further as to why it also even started. So I'll just go back to, I'm sitting on the plane coming home from the Oslo Freedom Forum. And at that time, I was also in the process of transferring to Cornell. I started at NYU Shanghai, but it was all online. So I was learning online from home, not actually in China, although I did spend my junior year of high school there. And so I'm transferring and I'm like, okay, I have to start a Bitcoin club. I really want to tell my, friends and peers about this. And also I want to figure out how to study it. And so when I was applying to colleges, I was really looking at cognitive science programs, which is like psychology, philosophy, linguistics, computer science, really getting at how can we ask better questions, think about the world differently, navigate uncertainty. And Cornell only had a minor in cognitive science when I was applying. And so I was just going to go with computer science and Chinese. But then I'm looking again on the website and there they have it, but they also have an independent major program. And so that was the beginning of both the club and the major. Both were a 15-month process until they were kind of approved and official. It happened at the same time. I'm happy to chat more about that. But to get to your question, most universities and college campuses have blockchain clubs. And so I arrived at Cornell. I went to student activities and said, hey, I want to start a Bitcoin club. And they're like, okay, you're going to need 10 people. And also, we would really recommend that if there's a similar natured club, you just go join that. And so I said, you know what? I don't know 10 people yet. And so maybe this would be a good opportunity for me to go make some friends. And so I joined Blockchain Club. But really, just the more time you spend in the space, they're just different. They deserve to have different spaces, different conversations happen, different to your question. The projects look different inside of them. And so 15 months later, or I guess maybe 12, I was like, you know what, Ella, more than 10 people now, let's start a Bitcoin club. And throughout the process of both starting that club and trying to start the major, it's a lot of work, upfront work to do it. And it's way more effective if it's kind of a bottom-up approach, just like Bitcoin, a much more grassroots, peer-to-peer ethos to it than some top-down dictated, this is what you can study, this is how you study it. And so that also kind of sparked the Bitcoin Students Network, which basically just helps students start these communities and conversations wherever they are. And so provide kind of logistic operational resources, help you with the education side of things, speakers, meeting plans. We actually tomorrow have our first internship program. The applications are closing for to actually go spend the summer with Bitcoin communities and really contribute to this idea of layer zero. And so in this club, I've also, with the Bitcoin Club here at Cornell, I've just transitioned it over to a new group. So now it's in semester 3, but we've done everything from just kind of basic intro lessons to we set up a lightning node with voltage. We've had speakers come in covering philosophy with Bradley Rettler, policy like with Jason Brett. Manuela Rios at Strike came and spoke kind of on the product side, development side. And so, I think you would appreciate, especially from your book, Bitcoin is so interdisciplinary. You can take it in many different directions. And that's really what we get at.
That's so cool. And so you mentioned it's sort of like infrastructure for students to get this off the ground at their own universities. How is that endeavor going? I know there have been some clubs springing up around, but what's the uptake like?
Yeah. So right now, and I should say it's very different stages, but there's about 1,500 students in the network across 69 countries. And there's about 115 clubs that are at some stage of development. Actually, just yesterday, I was messaging with someone at another university in the US, and they went through the same problem I had. They're like, Ella, we got a faculty sponsor. We had more than the required people for the club. We had all of our documents in order. And the university told us no, because they didn't think there was long-term potential in the club, and that the intro to crypto investing was already doing it. And so it's kind of a mixture of, you have students that are really eager doing it, but then the university kind of puts up a roadblock. And then there's also people that might not be in an official university capacity, but are still, looking at the community around them and organizing events. Last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, one of the clubs in Nigeria, they held a God Bless Bitcoin documentary screening, and there were about 200 students that showed up for that. And so it looks different all across the world, but for the specific numbers, it's about 100-ish clubs.
That's incredible. Congratulations. It's a very cool achievement.
Oh, well, it's not just me. I can't do the actual execution of the clubs. There's so many students around the world that are doing really incredible things, and we're all just a node in this big network.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I can't help but laugh at, it's a sad state of, we'll say, the legacy education system and their own challenges. Legacy finance is the same, of trying to understand the innovation of Bitcoin and just sort of lagging around how important this thing is. It is really it was probably the same with understanding the internet and information technology, and it's difficult, I think, for these large, slow-moving institutions to potentially be on the cutting edge. Maybe that's not their job, but for how important it is. I mean, Bitcoin should be in high school curriculum. There should be entire university courses just on Bitcoin. I'm sure we're not far away, but it can't happen fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, what Primera is doing with all the schools that they now have the education in, it's incredible. And Kathy Wood actually, she was kind of a big part of my origin story to Bitcoin. I'll just quickly finish the thought that some of the art curriculum is now in schools in Florida, really young kids classes, which is cool. One of the classes I took my first year of college was on creativity, and you got to choose a creator to study. And so this is the year after I had first learned of distributed ledger technology and blockchain. And then I spent a semester studying her. And it's kind of a similar narrative, but different, because it's, how can we think about how the world will work and where it's going? And this idea of disruptive innovation and creative destruction. And so anyways, we basically broke down all of what their artist profile looks like in terms of creativity. And I think kind of just studying her and some mindset helped me along my journey to appreciate Bitcoin.
I've heard you talk a little bit about, you're talking about distributed ledger technology and imagining this future world. One of the things that I am curious about with younger Bitcoiners is that you are going to potentially likely be around much longer to see this future world evolve in a much different way. And one of these things that comes along with, at the outset of the episode, you mentioned property rights. So Bitcoin is a transformational technology of how we think about ownership, and will probably change the relative value of different types of property. As someone with a longer time horizon for owning Bitcoin and being younger, what do you think Bitcoin means for the future of saving?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, because so many times I kind of stop myself, and I don't know, maybe I hear Jeff Booth in my head about, what world mindset are you thinking in? Kind of what system are you thinking in, or looking at a problem in? And with Bitcoin, we have this opportunity where we don't, to quote Saifedean, we don't have to earn our wealth twice. Our money can actually grow in value and preserve value. You don't have to just spend all this time working to grow it. And so I think that's going to be a huge component as well, because it gives us so much more agency and choice over how we spend our time. Today, if you look at the statistics, most young people don't think the American dream is achievable anymore. I think buying a house is just outside of the scope of what they want to do. And they also don't want to follow just the traditional path of what has been done, the checkboxing. You go to college, you work this certain type of job, you live in this one area your whole life. And so, I think what's really exciting is like the future is so unknown, and it's actually can be this like hopeful, positive thing where you get choice over how you handle that and not fear of, oh, it's all unknown and how am I going to take care of myself and provide for my family? And so I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I think it's, so foundationally different that it will look really interesting. And it's also not that far off. Right now, Gen Z, it's like the age or the years in it. It is 1997 to 2013. And so that's like 11 to 27-year-olds. And so you mentioned earlier, you have all these people who are just graduating college, just working their first jobs, just thinking about how do I build my nest egg, and this really thinking about saving and spending because now you're getting your first paychecks. And I think maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago now, Galaxy Research published a report looking at, how much money do we think is going to flow into, for them it was crypto more broadly, but it's like $160 to $225 billion by 2045. And so then that puts the Gen Z age group kind of in, if they're 11 to 27 now, it's like 21 to 37. The numbers are a little off. But I think we're going to start seeing this in these choices that are being made, pretty soon in the next couple decades.
You mean trillion?
No, billion.
Billion. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I love this quote. I'm glad you mentioned it. Safe's quote about, you don't have to earn your money twice, because I really think that we are, this is one of these ideas that we're still in the middle of now, but will seem very, one of these things that we look back on being like, oh yeah, why did we have to go out and gamble our money once we'd already earned it and pay taxes on it, just so that hopefully in the future it would be valuable enough when we needed it to again, that we wouldn't have lost ground. And I do think these things, it can feel like it's taking a long time when you're in the moment. But to go back to the analogy of me and the information age, my first year in college was the college I was attending was just rolling out its email system. And I don't feel that old now, but it's impossible for most people to imagine a world before email. And that's really just, in a matter of like 20 or 30 years. And so, at this time frame again, absolutely. I think that much change can definitely occur with money. It's just something that is maybe, I think it had to happen with information first, because it's just a little bit safer than, money. It's a big idea of what is going to have to happen with money and how, because of how it interacts with all sort of aspects of our life. And it's just a much more foundational thing of how we think about organizing society.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you brought up this idea of what's kind of a safer topic or a safer concept, this idea of information being safe. And so for my independent study, or it's in an independent major program that I'm studying Bitcoin under, my kind of focus of the thesis is thinking about Bitcoin as this language and really kind of leaning into this idea of a communication protocol and kind of getting at or touching on information and how are we going to speak this new language of the future and really understand and perceive the transitions that are underway.
I would love to dive into that. I have, or you may know, if you mentioned my book, like I have some similar ideas. I think that Bitcoin certainly is a language of value, and it's a new way for us to actually just think about how we sort of like measure and compartmentalize and organize all this information about price signals in the world. But it is much more than that. So how would you describe this, the language of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I'm like, my entire living room wall is like covered in sticky notes as I'm trying to piece together what direction I'm coming at this argument in. But I think coming at kind of the dots that led me to get here, I think very early on, lots of people in their Bitcoin journey pick up the sovereign individual or at least hear a lot of the concepts there. And so one of the quotes early on in the book that just always stuck with me was this idea of how do we perceive transitions that are underway? How do we really be more cognizant of understanding change as it's happening and not just, having it happen and then look back later and kind of see it clarified? And so I took this class earlier this year called Event Cognition, and really, how do we perceive events and event boundaries to try to see worked up to an answer with this. But at the root of it, I think, how can you understand change or what's happening if you don't even have a way to communicate it? And I think so much in our world is distorted. Our even perception of reality is so influenced by what media you see. and just Bitcoin offering itself as this like base layer of truth and something that's verifiable. I'm kind of, getting into the working on this argument now, but I think it's just like an essential base layer to help us, have some language frame of reference of information to, perceive anything accurately.
Yeah, which is a huge idea. This event cognition, that's such a really, I wish I could take some of these courses. But it's partly also, I think, why it's so fascinating to hear the thoughts around what is possible with Bitcoin with people who are sort of your age, because there is also something about the longer you go on, the harder it is for most people to imagine like a really radical transformation of stuff. Whereas the earlier you are in your journey, the less attached you are to the way things are being done currently, and probably the more eager you are to see things change.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's what I think I've really appreciated with it. And I hope, other young people get out of it. It's just like the opportunity and ability to think about something that just makes your brain like light up and feel it's working and, really find fulfillment. And a lot of how education works today in this mindset of kind of all the predetermined boxes you have to check is it's tangent. I was looking at where does the word education come from? And it has like a multifaceted origins to it from the Latin roots. One side of it is about this idea of just kind of pouring knowledge into a vessel, like a person. Like you just have this, subset that you're just going to keep transferring and pouring on. And the other one is where you really kind of pull out the knowledge from within a person and kind of awaken it within someone. And what we have today, I think, is really just this model of I'm just going to transfer and pour knowledge from one person to the next because that's what scales. I think it's really hard to scale, critical thinking, writing, some of those skills. And so I hope what Bitcoin can do for people, it's just like, college, when you graduate, that should really be the starting line of your life and the starting line of thinking what you want to do. Like Bitcoin can be the starting line too for you. We talked about property rights, giving you that personal foundation and protection to just go and really like be awakened as a full person. Sounds a little, I don't know, culty, but I've really appreciated that I have gained from Bitcoin thus far.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Doesn't, I don't know, I think at times culty can be thrown around in a way that refers to Bitcoin with actually, if you think about it, it sounds pretty good. You also mentioned earlier, I wanted to come back to this point about AI because you're studying AI and the ethics of AI, and we've done a few episodes now about sort of potential future overlap between Bitcoin and AI. Was it your Bitcoin interest that led you to AI study, or did they happen separately?
No, not at all. The story really goes back to when I was studying abroad in China. So I did a year abroad program called School Year Abroad, which is basically where you can choose to go to Italy, France, China, or Spain for a year. And you live with a host family. And like I wore a Chinese high school uniform, went to class with, Chinese students. And so that's where I chose. When I landed, I had zero knowledge of Mandarin, like not even hello, but I just like to do hard things. And so I was like, you know what, let's move to China. And in one of our lessons with our incredible teachers, she wrote up on the board a character, and my tones are horrible. They've never been good, but it was Xiao from Xiaoxuan, which is basically it's filial piety, which is one of the tenets of Confucianism, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. And essentially, so she's writing the character on the board, and the top part of the character is the character Lao from old, and the bottom is the character Zi, child. And so what filial piety says is that when you are young, your parents will look after you, take care of you. But when you grow up and your parents are elderly, you kind of return what they did for you. You look after them. You take care of them. And so this character visually represents this supporting relationship, this kind of societal norm and expectation. And so I was learning this. And then at the same time, I was actually, I hadn't started yet at IBM. I think I was just taking like an online course about AI from Coursera or somewhere. And then when I got back to the US when COVID broke out. My school did this kind of intermission program where your junior year, you do an internship. And so I chose one with IBM, and it was supposed to be only 2 weeks. And then I went through like 4 extensions and ended up being there 2 years. And I was working on their, it's called Skills Build, their kind of learning platform, as well as building out their STEM for Girls program. And so when I was there, I was just surrounded a lot by AI and, again, some blockchain. At the time, they still had Hyperledger. And that was really where I was kind of introduced to AI ethics. And so then, and sorry if this is a little jumbled, I am next working on writing my college essay applications. And it's all about, what is the greatest problem you see in the world? What do you want to work on? What is something that makes you think? So, of course, I'm trying to write something intelligent and interesting. And basically what I come up with is, can you code ethics into AI, a computer language, like you can a human spoken language? If we can code, like from that Chinese character, some moral, ethical norm in society in, written form in a human language, can you do it in a computer language? And so that was really the origin of it, the root of it. Fast forward a couple more years, I took a class here called the Psychology of Language. And in short, I think you really can't do that. We kind of went into this whole theory about let's term the language game, but it had nothing to do with Bitcoin. If I had known about Bitcoin, all my college essays probably would have been about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story nonetheless. Just as a side point, where exactly were you studying in China?
I was in Beijing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people haven't been to China. It's an incredible place to visit and absolutely worth it. Not the easiest place to get around. It takes some preparation to plan a trip, but certainly worth the effort.
Actually, I would disagree. I think it was. Yeah, I mean, I will admit there was a moment when I was standing for 45 minutes at the wrong bus stop. So it's not, totally easy, but the people were so friendly and beyond kind and just generous with how they treat each other. One time I was trying to sign up for a gym membership and I needed to go to the ATM to get cash to pay the deposit. And the girl who was working there, she walked with me and kind of it felt like she was trying to protect, or she felt it was her responsibility to protect me and take care of me and make sure that I just felt comfortable with where I was going. And I had that happen so many times. And also apps make it so easy to kind of Google Translate things. And it's very orderly. So I think it's just logistically hard to get there. But once you're there, I didn't think it was too bad.
Hey everyone, quick question. Have you ever thought about starting a video podcast like this one? I want to introduce you to the team behind my show, Podigy. This podcast has been one of the best marketing tools for our business, and thanks to Podigy, all I have to do is hit record. They handle everything else: editing, writing, publishing, and making sure that it's perfectly optimized for every platform. They only work with disruptors, mavericks, and change makers, people making a real difference, spreading big ideas. Typically, Podigy is fully booked, but right now they have a few spots open for new clients. Listeners of this show get 10% off launching their own podcast or optimizing their current one. Click the link in the bio for a free one-on-one podcast planning session with Podigy. If you are thinking about starting a podcast or you have one and you want to take it to the next level, I can't recommend Podigy enough. Check them out. To come back to Bitcoin Students Network as the sort of your transitioning in your student career, how is that? What is the future of that organization? And maybe if students are listening and they wanted to get involved with a Bitcoin organization at their own university, what would they need to know?
Yeah. So just really quickly, if you want to start a club at your university, first off, you don't need any permission from the Bitcoin Students Network. Sometimes people will ask, what's the application process like to do a club with you? Or no, it's very much kind of an ethos of decentralized, not disorganized. Someone told me that, and I think it fits perfectly. To be an official node, there is a very quick form and just some agreements and terms that you agree to of how you operate and function and kind of what values you embody. For instance, there's no blockchain. But really, there's just a very quick form online that you can fill out. And then also on our website, it links you to all of the resources. There is, for instance, like a very robust spreadsheet broken up into different times throughout the semester of the year of when you might want to think about completing certain tasks for your club. And there's also templates to everything that you can just take and use and change how you'd like. So basically, I just took everything I made for the Cornell Club and used it kind of as a template for this. And so there's that. I also, a couple weeks ago, posted a workshop on how you can go about starting a club and kind of some, I don't know, tips I learned from doing it, or, little pieces of advice that maybe are helpful. And so all of that's there. It's just bitcoinstudentsnetwork.org for any student that's listening, or you can just reach out to me. It's, after this, I have a call with a couple students in Malawi. And so I love talking to people. And then in the future of the organization, it really doesn't need me to exist. I'm still going to be involved with it, as well as Arsh. We, also work on partnerships that benefit students, whether that be conferences, internship opportunities. And so that will all still continue on. And then also working on a fellowship program, because I think for anyone that's seen Meg J's TED Talk, where she really reiterates the importance of kind of for young people going out and getting some, as she calls it, identity capital. We really want as many students as possible to be able to kind of build up their proof of work resumes, where often those opportunities don't exist yet.
That's very cool. So what is that fellowship program, or what will it entail?
Yeah, and it'll have multiple versions and iterations, but at the core, strengthening community. That's really why the Students Network started, is how can we better connect students to each other and our industry? My journey when I got to Cornell, I thought I was the only person interested in Bitcoin here, and that might be the case for many other people. But then once I just started the club and created the space, last semester we ended with 124 members. And so a lot of it's just taking that first step and creating that community. And so, yeah, the fellowship will basically be a lot of community fostering orientedness. So working with other clubs in your area, local Bitcoin businesses, meetups, circular economies, conferences. Because we're lucky that there are people all around the world working really hard to kind of strengthen this peer-to-peer network of Bitcoin. And it's not efficient, and it's not quite possible for just me to try to foster it. And the students in that area can do it much better than I could.
Yeah, that's so cool. As a result of some of this, or maybe parallel to it, you've had some pretty interesting opportunities. You were in Africa. Was this, I guess, a few months ago now? Maybe share a little bit about your experiences traveling in the Bitcoin world, and what have been some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much gratitude for all of the people that have hosted me and I guess kind of believed in me, that I was, a valuable addition to their conferences and the communities they were fostering. This was my second year at the Africa Bitcoin Conference. I actually met Farida Nabarima, who organizes the conference, at Bitcoin Prague in 2023. We just happened to share a cab, and then she extended an invitation for me to join the second Africa Bitcoin Conference in Ghana last year. And so she's just been, one of those people who has been so unbelievably supportive. I'm really grateful for that. But it was great to be, again, there at the third iteration in Kenya this year. I gave a talk basically on, starting Bitcoin clubs, why it actually matters for younger generations to be involved in the space. And then I also presented some research updates from a study I'm working on with Cornell Brooks Tech Policy Institute here. They are really doing the first study looking at Bitcoin adoption and financial freedom across 25 countries. Historically, the past 5 years or so, Chainalysis has done a crypto adoption index, but there has been nothing that isolates in on Bitcoin. So that's what this study is doing, also inclusive of stablecoins. And so we have 25 countries, and there are two parts. One part is kind of the quantitative, the survey data. So we have a polling agency partner that's doing kind of 1,000 person surveys in all of the countries. And then we're doing kind of qualitative, the story interviews that we have 10 people from the Cornell Bitcoin Club doing. And so we'll have about 250 of those to really see, not just have the data, but tell the story with it.
Any early insights you can share from the study or?
Actually, I think we're still getting our data in. I would actually point people to Troy Cross's and I think Andrew Perkins' study that they put out earlier this year, because at the time, and still we really only have the US data, and it's really correlated to what they found. And so I would send people to their report. It's called the Nakamoto Project.
We'll put a link for that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Great. So are you able to sort of share what's next for you then as you're continuing on your Bitcoin journey? Any places where our listeners might be able to find more of you if they are listening and want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduate in May, and then I am going to spend a couple months with the Gridless team in Kenya right after graduation. And then I'm going back full time to Galaxy's Bitcoin mining team. And then you could just find me on Twitter. It's just 21mm for the 21st.
Awesome. Ella, any final thoughts before we wrap the conversation? Or
well, first, thank you so much for having me, Scott, and for your book. And honestly, I haven't finished it, but I'm hooked, and I'm probably going to have to read it a couple times. There's a lot of great insights in that. And then always, just for students, if you're listening, I think it can be hard to figure out where a first step might be or what's a good first question to ask. And so I really just would be really grateful for the opportunity to talk to any young people that are listening and be able to be supportive however possible.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I'm certainly flattered that you have picked up the book. So I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I would just say, I'm also a fan, and it's so impressive what you have been able to do already. Congratulations. And it's really, I think it speaks to the power of Bitcoin, that there are people, it's an initiative that people can get behind and make a difference. And it looks different for everybody, but to see young people taking action now is just so exciting. And you can see how fast it spreads. So it's very cool to watch.
Yes. Well, thank you.
All right. And that's all for this week. If you're listening and you made it all the way to the end of the episode, I want to thank you as well for tuning in, and hope to see you next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Block Reward. We're trying to do something different here, creating accessible conversations meant for people who aren't obsessed with Bitcoin. If you found this episode informative and engaging, hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay updated with future episodes. Your feedback matters. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to share your reviews and help us with our goal of creating Bitcoin content that is simple and easy to understand. Bitcoin has an important role to play in the future of finance. It will change the way we save, spend, and invest. Discover why Bitcoin offers a game-changing opportunity for forward-thinking employers by visiting blockrewards.ca. Block Rewards' mission is helping Canadian employers implement strategies for integrating Bitcoin into compensation and benefits, supercharge your recruitment and retention strategies, and help your team members plan for the rising cost of living by rewarding their work with the hardest money ever invented. Special thanks to our top sponsor, Paramount Employee Benefits Consulting, Canada's only Bitcoin forward benefits and pension advisory. For more information, find them at paramountbenefits.ca. Big shout out to Podigy, our production team that makes all this possible, and BMX Escape for producing our music. Bitcoin is an expansive and dense topic many people walk away from early. To Bitcoin enthusiasts looking for that podcast they can share with friends, family, and colleagues, one they'll actually listen to, we hope that is us. The content of these conversations is meant to be provided for information purposes only. Nothing here is investment advice. Bitcoin is a big topic. Be sure to do your own research before making any personal financial decisions. Thanks for listening.